The first boss of the Firelands will spawn after you have killed
Insert amount of trash.
at the location of Bellrock's Arches, circling the road in a counterclockwise fashion. Health pool, damage, hitbox sizes. Heroic Shannox, accompanied by Rageface and Riplimb. None of them can be taunted, Rageface cannot be tanked. The TLDR of this fight is have Shannox faced away from your raid. Have Riplimb tanked 75 yards away from Shannox. Every 8 seconds, check your feet. If there's a trap, move out of it. When Rageface face rages somebody, they should either pop an immunity before the stun commits, or have somebody hit Rageface for 45,000 damage. Crits are guaranteed. Suss out the crystal traps and put Rageface in them. When Shannox throws his spear, Riplimb becomes susceptible to slows when it's in his mouth, and is immune to all trap effects. Slow him to delay his return to the boss. Bait the boss away from his return if you need more time for the bleeds to fall off your tanks. Freeze what you can, but most importantly, zug the boss. Now for the in-depth explanation and alternative strategies. Shannox and Riplimb share a threatening bleed effect. Through Shannox is produced by his arcing slash, averaging every 10 seconds, unless he's doing something else. From Riplimb, it's from his limb rip. Ho ho, this occurs every 8 seconds. You ideally do not want to have one tank tanking both Riplimb and Shannox, as this bleed will accumulate rapidly. It cannot be bopped, it cannot be immune. The only thing that dispels it is time, which his other gimmicks come into play. Roughly every 44 seconds, he will throw his spear. This lands within a 10-yard radius around Riplimb. This gives him what seems like a flavor debuff called Dogged Determination, where he will fetch at the location of the spear and attempt to return it to his master. During the duration of this debuff, he can be slowed, but no more than 50% of his movement speed. No traps will affect him on his way back to his master, and as long as his master doesn't have his spear, he cannot apply Jagged Tear to the main tank. And with Riplimb preoccupied trying to return said spear, he cannot apply a bleed effect to his tank. In the interest of your tank's survival, you want to delay them from meeting up for as long as your debuff is lasting. For this particular mechanic, you can choose to ignore it, approach it smartly, or approach it really smart. You can opt to ignore this and just try to zug the boss down if you have the DPS, and kill it before the bleeds become threatening, using a frost trap here or there to delay Riplimb from harming your off-tank as much. Obviously when he doesn't have the spear in his mouth. You could keep him at 75 yards, have him fetch the spear, slow him, and as he's coming back towards Shannox, walk Shannox away, giving you a little bit more time. Or, really smart, like, you can use the terrain to your advantage. What if I told you, you can be within 80 yards of the boss and make him walk 300 yards and not even move? There are these canyons on the map, ridges, where he can throw the spear over the ridge. The dog can retrieve that spear, and then he has to walk to the entrance of the incline of that ridge and then back down, giving you all the time in the world to belay this buff. There is a caveat, though. You can't go super ham with it, because the devs were smart enough to realize that people would try this kind of thing. If the pathing distance total exceeds more than 150 yards, the spear will instantaneously go back in the Shannox's hand, and Riplimb will just beat on his tank as if nothing occurred. So you cannot super cheese it, just 150 yards is the limit if you're doing this. Do note, doing it this way, you do not even have to slow the dog. By the time he gets back to you, your debuff will be about to fall off or have already fallen off. So in this example, I am on the Cata PTR second wave on my druid, providing evidence that this does work on the Cataclysm client. Also to slightly dispel the belief that fundamentally over time, retail didn't change from Cataclysm. 9 times out of 10, the broken aspects of the scripts work the same. The question is, how far can you take this on the Cata client if there is any alteration? And I will leave this up to you all to discover when this is available to you. And because I thought of the idea after he was killed, I did not get to test if life gripping the tank over the embankment would allot for a longer kiting, or if a path would even be available for the ability. Note that this does suck to do if your group is adamant about not having a healer down with that tank, limiting how much the playfield the tank has access to, being anchored 40 yards to the healer on the other side of the ridge. 25-man should be the optimal playing field to test this out. As for 10-man, unless you have a dedicated healer, or grip tech works, because you can jump back anytime unpenalized, it is sufficient enough to do the walk the dog strategy. And bonus points, there is a significant delay between the indicator of the spear going to a place, the spear landing at that place, which then triggers the dog to go to that spear, which gives you a bunch more free time to pull the dog away from the location it'll go to, slow it as it gets there, and slow it as it goes to the boss. Additional point, slows do apply to him when he is in spear mode. Thank you for your time and humor me dispelling bullshit. Woo. Less important, but still noteworthy, the spear itself is a damaging effect. At the location that it lands, 3 yards, it does a hell of a lot of damage. The little fire graphics that swirl out from it are not just for show. If you are within 1 yard of it, they also do a hell of a lot of damage. And for anyone within 50 yards of the spear, it will take unavoidable, mild fire damage that will only be threatening to you if you have stepped into an emulation trap, which increases said damage. The pain is easy to avoid, and this should not be a threatening thing to heal through. Every 8 to 9 seconds, he will place a trap down on a random raid member. The first, and every third after, is a crystal freezing trap. The 2 in between every freezing trap are immolation traps. Only players and the dogs can trigger these traps. If a dog triggers a trap, they are immune to doing so again for 24 seconds, as indicated by the debuff Wary. Let's focus on what the dog doing for a bit here. The dogs attack every 1.5 seconds, roughly. Every time they hit somebody, they accumulate this buff called Feeding Frenzy, which increases their outright damage by 5%. This doesn't apply to the bleed effect, but this is important for Rageface. Rageface has an ability called Face Rage.
Ho-ho, they did it again!
Where he lunges towards the target, pins them down, stunning them in place, dealing damage every 0.5 seconds for 30 seconds. These attacks do not increase Feeding Frenzy, but they are amplified by Feeding Frenzy, and each succession of attack is amplified by the buff Face Rage itself. So if he has low Feeding Frenzy, taking Face Rage for 8 seconds isn't that threatening. If it is high, however, you want that broken immediately, and at every opportunity you can, you want him to be frozen, ideally. Now, the immolation traps that are on the ground are just fodder. They're an annoyance for you, and they prevent the dogs from being frozen if they trigger one for 25 seconds. The ice traps, when procced by the dogs, will commit seppuku over 10 seconds. It'll keep them there, but they'll just reduce the health by 10% as they're on fire. RP, it's burning the trap, oh no. So you have to make up the other 10 seconds of him not hitting somebody to have Feeding Frenzy fall off. A general rule of thumb for your ranged, it's just good to be spread out and have Rageface as a focus target. Just have people avoid being hit the best you can. Freeze him, then relocate away from him if it's a concern for you. So outlier things. If for some reason you decide to drag one of the dogs farther than 80 yards from Shannox, him and the dog will get an ability called Separation Anxiety, doubling their attack speed and damage. This will remove itself if pulled back within 80 yards of each other, but it will still last at least 4 seconds of its initial duration. If one of your raiders tunnels and decides to just sit in a frost trap that is placed underneath them, congratulations, you have wasted 1.16 million DPS, and a dog is now free to do damage to the raid that it would otherwise not be doing. This is like the only mechanic. Yeehaw, I had a whole 3 seconds to move and I decided to press this button. If for some reason you kill Riplimb, he will now plunge his spear into the ground every 12 seconds. This will leave a damage taken buff on everybody in the raid that stacks, lasting for a minute. It's its own premature enrage timer if you decide that the dog should die for some reason. And it says he'll revive the dog, cannot confirm. And that is Shannox! Yay! So I want to snippet this in. Yes, there is an ability called Frenzy Devotion. Back during actual Firelands, this was not in the heroic variant of the fight. However, Blizzard posted a message that they were tracking a known issue of it not activating when the boss drops below 30% on heroic. So it is up in the air whether this ability will happen on heroic or not, completely by Blizzard's discretion at launch. If it is in, time freezes at 30%. If it isn't, change nothing. After all this has been said, one question remains. Will you be able to solo tank this boss? And the answer is probably. Some potential for jank exists on the action of returning the spear to Shannox. I'm not going to showcase it here, because, the potential for fun detected. So in the description there is a video from back in the past, showcasing this tech. If that doesn't work, then the answer lies in trapping Riplimb into spear throws at a distance, or outgearing it, where the damage doesn't matter. Respect to those who dedicate the time and discover new tech. Wrapping up. Thanks for watching. Thank you to my Patreons. Here's the stuff I use, links to my Twitch and Patreon, and I will see you again soon. TM.